everyone. I'm gonna do a new video today. In one of my other videos, my friend said they could hear the cat in the background, so I thought I'd introduce you to Kiwi Cat. This is Kiwi Cat, and he's quite vocal, so you might hear him in the back of some of these videos. So what we are going to do today is we're going to create a app that will teach us how to go from one screen to the other. So we're going to learn about segues and going from one screen to the other screen. We'll also create some random numbers to select pictures from an array, so we'll see different pictures when we go to the other screen. And that's what we're going to do today. Alright, open up Xcode, create a single view app. I'm going to call mine Segue Travel App. We're going to learn about how to use segues in Xcode. And we're going to do it in the form of like a travel app. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to bring in the assets, the images, into our assets folder. So your assets folder should be linked in the description of this video, so just grab those, and I have mine in this folder here. Just going to highlight them all and drag them into my assets folder. When I created these images, what I did is I went onto Unsplash, which is a great place to find images to use. And if you look in the link of the description, you'll see the people whose images I used. I gave them credit down below. And what I did is I downloaded the JPEGs, I changed them into PNGs. The reason why is you can make a PNG larger and smaller on the screen of the iPhone, and it's not going to pixelate. And I also renamed them to something really short and something I can remember. So I have 3 images of Hong Kong. I have HK1, HK2, and HK3. I have 3 images of Bangkok, BKK1, BKK2, and BKK3. I have a background image for my home screen, and I also have a home button. When I want to go back to the home, I'm going to use that image as a button. Okay, so our assets are in our asset library. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to go to the main storyboard, and I'm going to drag in a few things from the object library. I'm going to drag in a couple buttons. And an image view. What I'm going to do with that image view is I'm going to constrain it to all 4 sides, so it covers the whole screen. And before I put a 0 in here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to this drop down, and I'm just going to say view instead of safe area. I want to go all the way to the edge of the view instead of using the safe area because I should also uncheck constrain to margins. And now I have to go back and do all the way in the view. I want to cover the whole view. I don't want to just use the safe area. So this this image will be like the background. Okay, I have those all set to view, so I can put in zeros now. And when I add these 4 constraints, you'll see the image will cover the whole screen. And we can set that image in the inspector pane to background. I'm going to do aspect fill, so it covers the whole screen. But if you notice, our buttons are gone. So we've put our image on top of our buttons, but it's really easy if we go over here to background, we can drag it on top of the safe area, and then the buttons will be on top. So here's one button. It's hard to see them right now, so let's set the background to white. And this button I'm going to change to say Bangkok. And I'm going to make the text a little bit bigger. How big did I make it? 28. Okay, I just have to find the other button. There it is. Alright. We've got our button and our image. The next thing I want to do is I want to add a Navigator Control. So I'm going to go up here to Editor. I'm going to go into Embed In, and I'm going to say Navigation Controller. Alright. I am going to drag this one down next to the other one. I like to have them in a line so it's easier to see them all. Alright, I'm going to close some of these panes and I'm going to open up the Assistant Editor. The reason why is I want to connect these buttons that we've just put in. So I'm going to Control, click, and drag. I'll call this HK button. I want to change it to a UI button and connect that. The next one is the Bangkok button. Control, click, and drag. Change it to a UI button. Connect. Alright, I have my two buttons connected. When we added in our navigation control, I should probably give it a title. So I am going to go into the storyboard. I'll call it Travel App. And then the title will appear at the top of the navigation bar. So this navigation bar will help us navigate back and forth between our view controllers. So why don't we add another view controller to the storyboard. So you can just drag the view controller into the storyboard. And the next thing we have to do is we have to create a new file for this. So over here I'm going to do a right click or two finger click if you have your trackpad set up that way. I'm going to do a new file. It's going to be a Cocoa Touch class because what I want to do is I want to create a subclass, a UI view controller. So I'm going to use I'm going to call this Travel View Controller, and it's going to be a subclass of the UI view controller. So I'll have those traits with it, and then say next, create. What I like to do is when it shows up down here, I just like to drag my Swift files up next to the other view controller. Oh, come on. Alright, there we go. Just keep it organized. And then in this view controller, we're going to go into the identity inspector. It's this one. It looks like an ID card, or and I can do the drop down. Let's see, and I'm going to pick Travel View Controller. So what I'm doing is I added a new view controller. We created a view controller file, and then we're just connecting them by putting the name in the identity inspector. So now this file will control the new view controller that we just added to the storyboard. Alright, now let's connect the two view controllers or create the segues. We're going to do two segues. We're going to do them two different ways just so you can see the different ways to do the segue. The first one I'm going to do is I'm going to control, click, and drag from the Bangkok button into the Travel View Controller. And I'm going to pick Action Segue Show. And you'll see it show up right here. So when I click on that, I can go into the Attributes Inspector, and I can give it a name. I'll call it BKK Segue. And the other way that you can create a segue is to do it more programmatically. I'm going to control, click, and drag from this yellow button anywhere into the Travel View Controller. And I'm going to pick Manual Segue Show. And so we've created two different segues, and you can see them right here in between. So when we hit the Bangkok button, we're going to go through this segue, and when we hit the Hong Kong button, we're going to do some program or some coding, and we'll be able to get through that segue as well. Alright, so let's set up our Travel View Controller. So we are going to drag in a button. And we're going to drag in an image view. So for the button, I'm going to get rid of the text. And I'm going to set the image to home. It's like a home button for us using an image. I think I'll put some constraints on that. I think I'll set it horizontally in the container. And I think I will constrain it from the bottom. Looks like 108. I'll just go with that. And then this UI image we want to take up about half the screen, maybe even down a little bit. Alright. We can constrain that as well. I'm gonna go to the view, not the safe area, when I'm constraining this. I'll add those 4 constraints. Okay, so we called this our Travel View Controller. Travel View Controller is set up. Alright, I'm going to open up the Assistant Editor. And I'm going to control, click, and drag this button. I am going to get rid of this text right here. And then I'll control, click, and drag our button into that space. Alright, cool. We have our button connected, but we haven't put any code in it yet. We are going to go to our main view controller. And we're going to add another variable here at the top. This is going to be a Boolean, and I'm going to call it going to Hong Kong. I'm just going to say going to HK, and I'm going to set that to true. So we created this variable that's a Boolean, so it's either true or false, and it's called going to Hong Kong. So if the Hong Kong button is tapped, I want going to Hong Kong to be true, or to stay true, that's fine. And if the Bangkok button is tapped, I want going to Hong Kong to be false. And this is how I'll keep track of what images to show on the Travel View Controller. And we need to prepare for our segue. So up here, okay, so we have this override function, prepare for segue, and underneath it we're gonna set a constant, let NVC. I'm just using the letters NVC to stand for Next View Controller. And it's going to be a segue destination, and then we're going to add what we called the other view controller, which was Travel View Controller. So set destination as Travel View Controller. So we're just going to run our app now and see if it's doing what we want it to do. So we have started to do the Hong Kong button segue programmatically, but we haven't finished it. So when I hit the Hong Kong button, I don't think anything will happen. Nothing does happen. And we did the Bangkok button with that control, click, and drag, and then we named that segue with an identifier. So yeah, when I hit the Bangkok button, we come to the Travel View Controller. Our home button doesn't work. We haven't coded that yet. But because we have this navigation bar up top, we can go back to the home screen. All right. So yeah, the button, one of the button works, and we have to get the other button to start working. So to do that, we're going to come down in here where the Hong Kong button is pressed. So to get our Hong Kong button to work, we are going to call perform segue with identifier. It's going to ask us for a string, and that's the name of our segue, and I'm not sure if we named it. So let's go to the storyboard real quickly. We have our two segues here. The Bangkok button is connected, and that's called BKK segue. This one we haven't named yet, so let's give it a name. Segue to Travel View Controller, Segue to Travel VC. And now that we got a name, we can go back into our View Controller. We called it Segue to Travel VC, and we can put in nil here for the sender. I want to run that just to check it to make sure everything's working. And so now both of our buttons should work. One we did programmatically, and one we just control clicked and dragged. And our Hong Kong button works, and our Bangkok button works. So both of our segues are working, so that's a good sign. Alright, one thing we need to do is we need to pass through this Boolean value from the view controller to the travel view controller. And we'll do that in prepare, in this override function, prepare for segue. But before we code it, we have to go to the travel view controller, and we have to put another Boolean variable. So var, I'm going to say going to Hong Kong past, because we're passing the variable from one view controller to the other. And I'm going to write it a little bit differently. I'm going to tell it that it's a bool, and I'll put an exclamation mark promising that there'll be a value there. So then we have our value, or excuse me, our variable there. We can store the Boolean value, and we'll come back over here. And we're going to say NVC. Remember that stands for Next View Controller. I think we called it going to Hong Kong is going to be equal to our Boolean expression here, which is going to Hong Kong. Alright, and that's how we can pass through a value. So now that we have this Boolean expression going from the view controller to the travel view controller, we're going to know which button was pressed, if they pressed the Hong Kong button or if they pressed the Bangkok button, and that way we'll know what images to show them on the next page, or excuse me, the next view controller. So why don't we go over to that other view controller, that's the travel view controller, and in here, in view to load, we are going to create a lot of constants for all the images that we have, and then we're going to put all those images into an array. Okay, so that's the keyword for constant. I'm going to call it HK1, and I'm going to set it to the UI image named HK1 because that'll just be easier for me. And so I'm going to do this with all of the images. And I think I might do some copying and pasting and change this to 2. Now I want to do the Bangkok images. I'll call it BKK1, just like the image is called BKK1. If you can't remember exactly what you called your images, you can always check in the assets folder. So I've called mine BKK1, 2, and 3, and so that's what I want to use over here as well. So we've created constants for all of our images, and now we're going to put them into arrays. So I'll call let HK array equal HK1, HK2, HK3. And we'll do another array for Bangkok. Alright, and because we don't want to show the same image every time, I'm going to create another constant called random number. And I want it to be between 0 and 3. So if I enter a 3 here on the upper bound, then I'll have a random number, either 0, 1, or 2. So that I can use in my array, picking the picture that I want, or just a random picture. Okay, so let's do an if statement. If going to Hong Kong passed, so if that's true, then we want to show an image from Hong Kong. Oh, we'll have to connect our image view. I don't think we've connected our image view yet, so we'll go to the main storyboard, open up the assistant editor. Mine's set on manual for some reason, so I'm going to switch that to automatic. Make sure you're connecting this image with the right view controller. So this is the travel view controller. This is where I want to connect the image. I'll connect it up here by the variable. I'm going to control click and drag. I'll call it travel pick. Alright. So if going to Hong Kong passed, then travel pic dot image travel pic dot image is equal to Hong Kong array. We'll put these square brackets, and in these square brackets we'll put down random number. So it should pick a random image from there. And I'm just going to copy this. And I'm going to add an else statement. And I'm going to change this to BKK. And that should be good for our images. I'm going to run it to test it and see how it's working. Cool. We're getting some different pictures. Different pictures of Hong Kong and Bangkok. Great. So far, so good. Seems like our app is working the way we want it to so far, but we need this home button to start working. So I am going to go into the original view controller, and we have to put in something here called unwind to we're gonna put in a function called unwind to first view controller. I'll put it up here at the top. This is an IB action, func for function. It's a UI storyboard segue. And then we just need our curly brackets. Alright. And now in the storyboard, we are going to do a control click and drag from this yellow button to the exit here. And it's going to give us an option to choose unwind to first view controller with segue. That is that function that we just wrote on the other one, so we're going to select that. And if we highlight it over here and we open the inspector pane, we can give it an identifier. So I'm going to call it unwind to first view controller. Now let us go into our travel view controller, and when this home button is pressed, we want to perform that segue that we just called unwind to first view controller. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to type in self.perform segue. The string we just wrote, I think it was unwind to first view controller, and the sender can be nil. And I'm gonna run it and test it and see if our home button is working. Hey, our home button works. So I was just checking out our travel app, and it does what we want it to do. But one thing that bothers me is that when we go to the new travel view controller, we don't have a title here at the top. Only in the home screen does it say travel app. So I want it to say Bangkok, or I want it to say Hong Kong when we go to the different cities. So yeah, I think we'll do that, and I think that will be the end of this app, and hopefully we've learned how to do segues, and we've learned how to pass information from one view controller to the other, which is all really useful. So in here, if going to Hong Kong past is true, navigation item dot title, we can set to Hong Kong. If not, we'll go to Bangkok and we'll give the title there, Bangkok. I want to check that, make sure it's working, and then that'll be the end of the video. Great, it says Hong Kong at the top, which, yeah, it helps the user identify what they're looking at in the picture. And it says Bangkok at the top. So yeah, I think you could definitely make changes in this app. I encourage you to take what you learn, try to make it better. So I hope you learned how to create different view controllers, how you learned how to do segues from one to the other, and we learned how to pass information from one screen to the other when we passed that Boolean value over. So thanks for watching.